Hello, and welcome to another episode of Undiscovered Beasts and Strange Phenomena. Please join our experienced and knowledgeable panel of hosts as we explore the great mysteries of our time: Bigfoot, UFOs, ghosts, and unexplained phenomena.
Hello, good evening, and welcome to our show. Tonight, Mike and I are joined by our excellent, great friend Amy Bue, who's going to talk to us about strange creatures in Ohio, all sorts of things, from the Grassman, which is a Bigfoot-related creature, to some rather bizarre creatures like the Loveland Frog. Good evening, Amy, and welcome to our show.
Hello, thanks so much for having me. I'm so excited.
Great. Thank you, and we love you too, and it's a pleasure to have you on our show. So it's going to be a nice, relaxed chat. Now, some of these creatures in Ohio, people will know more about than others, so I'm going to start with a creature that people may not know a lot about, but I was reading accounts of it, and I sort of found it quirky and interesting. So the Loveland Frog, Amy, what is it?
That's what everybody wants to know. Well, I read a little bit about all these different things, and the Loveland Frog is something I've heard about years and years and years. And some people call it the Loveland Frog, some people call it the Loveland Frog Man, and some people say there's more than one, so it's Loveland Frog Men. And what is going on with that is it's down in Claremont County. Loveland, Ohio is a little bit northeast of Cincinnati, and what happened was back in, I think it was 1955, there was a salesman, so the story goes, that was walking along the road, and he saw these three beings. He said they were like between 3 and 4 foot tall. They were standing upright. They had leathery skin and faces that looked like a frog. And the weirdest part of the story is that you read in different accounts that these three creatures were kind of talking to each other. They're having a little bit of a meeting. And one of them takes out this wand or stick, people will say, and somehow it has sparks emitting from it. So that story sounds kind of crazy. And, there's been theories that maybe there were some kind of aliens or something like that. But that origin, that's the furthest back that I've heard of something. Although the Indians, the Native Americans around that area did talk about like a certain kind of a water spirit that looked frog-like. So I don't know if, all of these things kind of meshed together. In the 70s, there were actually 2 police officers that were involved in the Loveland Frog mystery. And one of them, the story goes, said he saw this frog-like creature near the river there. And he said that, he had been on patrol. He sees it. It disappears. Then a couple weeks later, there's another police officer who said he saw it. And he actually shot it, put it in the trunk of his car, and had the body. Now, that second police officer, I think it was in 2016, because I remember hearing about this on the news, said that, all of it had been like turned into I think they were calling it a hoax, but to me, it would be more like an urban legend where, something really did happen and then it grows into all of this other story. But he said that it was actually a very, very large, like 3 foot long iguana without a tail that he had shot and killed. So
do you think it's a case of an urban myth where somebody sees something, they're not familiar with it, they create things in their mind, and it becomes some fantastical story about alien frog creatures, or is there something more tangible to it? What's your opinion, having investigated it?
Well, my opinion, just with everything I've ever heard or read, is it does sound more like an urban legend. But the thing is, like, just a few years ago, again, there was in the newspapers, again, that somebody said that they saw one walking around down in the same area. So even to this day, these stories still persist. And again, you know, to me, if the police officer said that what he found was a large iguana, that it seems like a lot of different stories kind of got meshed together. But then you do have that 1955 account that was before the police officers, which I don't know. I don't know how to explain that. The three figures with the wand with the sparks. But it's an interesting story for sure.
It's a very interesting story, but when I looked at it, and I haven't done any qualitative investigation, I couldn't find any substantive trace of the man who said he'd seen it. It's always, he saw it, this salesman, but we can't. There's no audit trail, if you know what I mean.
Exactly. So it almost sounds like an old fairy tale or something. You know, there was this mysterious figure walking along, saw something else. So yeah, I feel like it's more of an urban legend, but it's a fun one.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I like the story of it. I thought it was interesting. So let's contrast the Loveland Frog, which very possibly may be one of the more implausible stories, with one of the legends that you think might be more plausible, and why. Which do you think of the many creatures that are around, allegedly, in Ohio, which has some substance, Amy?
Well, there's two that I think of when you're talking about, there you have legends like the Loveland Frog that kind of you think are based in a story that kind of maybe got out of hand. I have some other instances of those, but the two creatures that I think could possibly be true are, of course, Bigfoot, for anybody who knows me. Some people call the Ohio Grassman, and also one that really interests me is South Bay Bessie, and it's kind of Lake Erie's own Loch Ness monster. I have a little bit of more than a little bit of a problem with South Bay Bessie just because Lake Erie is so shallow. It's the smallest and the most shallow of all of the Great Lakes. I would feel that maybe there would be more sightings of something in there, but I'm the type of person, even with the Loch Ness monster, I think it's some type of an animal, if it exists, that we just can't quite, put our finger on. Maybe a sturgeon, a big sturgeon, maybe some kind of an eel or something like that.
Okay, well let's talk about. We'll come on to the Grassman later on because we can talk about Bigfoot for a while. But let's talk about some of the more unusual things first. So set the scene for the South Bay Bessie. What is it, and why do you think it might have some possibility of existing as a real creature?
Well, South Bay Bessie, the stories of South Bay Bessie, again, it's some type of it's supposed to be a very long creature, snake-like. There are some recorded sightings that say it has all these like little tiny flippers closer to its head. And about, you get anywhere between like 16 feet, 30 to 40 feet long, or even longer, I've heard or read about. And the reason I am curious about it is it started, the first sighting that I ever read about was from 1793. There was a captain on a ship that said he saw this creature, and I think he was the one that said it was 16 foot long. There was another few sightings in 1817. Another captain, I think the previous one was actually a whole crew of a ship that said they saw it. And in 1817, it was a captain of a ship, again, saying he saw this large animal that, had come up beside the ship. And throughout the years, every so many years, you have different people that say they've seen this. A lot of besides the length, which could be explained, I mean, creatures, anything could be longer or shorter depending on how old it was, genetics or whatever. So that doesn't bother me so much. But there have been a lot of people that have cited something that sounds very similar. And I just think that there could be some kind of a large fish obviously there are a lot of large fish in Lake Erie, or some kind of a big eel that people are seeing and mistaken for a monster. I mean, we have our Lake Erie Monster beer in Cleveland. We have the minor league hockey. Yeah, and we have a minor league hockey team called the Lake Erie Monsters. I think that's still around. I used to watch it when I lived in Cleveland. Yeah. And so it's kind of, you know, our pet monster up in Northeast Ohio.
Yeah, I think your hypothesis, you know, if you compare and contrast with Loch Ness, I mean, some people like Adrian Shine, for example, who's been there all the time, he used to pontificate that it was just a sturgeon, but I didn't think that myself when I went to Loch Ness. You know, there are very large mutant eels, very, very large indeed. You know, I spoke to fishermen who said that they'd caught eels which had the thickness of a man's waist. And if you see something like that, you know, you're a tourist and you see something like that in the water bobbing out of the water, then you hear about the Lake Erie monster or the Loch Ness monster, you know, your first reaction is going to be, I've seen the monster, you know. It's not a plesiosaur, it's a big eel. And so, yeah, you know, I think that's very plausible hypothesis as to what it might be. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was
one story that reminded me of Adrian Shine and the sturgeon theory of Loch Ness, because there were a couple of guys who said that they set a sturgeon on the shore of Lake Erie, and it was like writhing around in the sand, and they said the only weird thing was it had these weird flipper things, or like like flipper arms. But then when they ran away, they came back and it wasn't there anymore. They could see where it had been. But you're right, like a sturgeon and an eel look very different. So who knows?
Yeah, I think of it. I mean, I remember talking just tangentially, talking about Loch Ness. I remember a monk describing one, because there used to be a monastery there, and he wasn't, you know, people say, oh, it's all made up and blah, he was a log. The guy clearly saw a creature. He saw its head, yeah, and an eel seems to be the most plausible explanation, and maybe for Lake Erie, that's the case too. There's a number of strange other things that people talk about. What's this melon heads, Amy? What's that?
Oh, man. Melon heads.
Let's go weird for a minute. Because we've gone through some very plausible hypotheses for strange things. What is melon heads?
Melon heads are the stuff of nightmares. Like, I used to be afraid of these things when I was a little girl. There's a ghost story that goes around, like, at campfires and, you know, when you're at summer camp, called The Watermelon Baby. And that ghost story comes from this legend of these melon heads. So the melon heads come from Lake County, Ohio, and that's supposedly where this originated. And there's so many different stories depending on who tells it. The one I always heard was that there was this doctor and his wife that took in these children, and he was this evil doctor, and he performed experiments on them, and he like injected fluid into their heads and blew it up. And they were these little kids with these gigantic heads running around. And when the wife died, they got upset, these children, and burned down the house. and they escaped. Yeah, they escaped into the woods, and they would like crawl around. So if you went to a certain part of town, you know, the melon heads were supposed to be there. So that was one theory. Another story was that they were some secret government testing gone awry, and you know, that they were testing on people and had, you know, again, came out with these giant heads. Another one that they had an illness that caused that, like they were real people and were made fun of, and I never found anything to substantiate that. Like, what do you call it? Hydroencephalus, I think, you know, where you have the bigger skull.
Right.
So,
like the elephant man would have, yeah? Same sort of thing.
Yes, something like that, yes. So maybe there was something, you know, that started this legend. I've never been able to prove that, but I just think just the thought of that sounds so creepy, them crawling around in the woods, you know. Luckily when I'm out there in the forest, I don't think about the melon heads, or I probably wouldn't be able to go.
Would you not be able to
No.
go for a wee if you thought about the melon heads?
I don't think so. I can't. There's just certain things like the melon heads scare me. That's one thing. I shouldn't be admitting this because now my friends are going to try to get me. But I don't
No, they're probably not listening and they'll forget the melon head thing. You're not going to be teased about it at all. I'm sure.
No.
Yeah.
Well, they know what my number one fear is. They know my number one fear, and it's not melon heads. Would you like to know it? Should I admit it?
Tell me.
My number one fear is Lady Elaine Fairchild from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. That puppet.
Well, she's creepy to a lot of people.
She's really creepy. Like, and if she was in the woods, then I would cry. But no, I don't like her, and I don't like melon heads.
Okay. Now, your friend Tina will probably be buying a melon head even as we speak. She's probably
Tina's probably out there right now doing it. Speaking of Tina, do you want Tina Sams? You know, she is my super buddy, and she just found a possible footprint, a Bigfoot footprint, when we had our Bigfoot event, which we can talk about later.
Yeah, we'll talk about it later. Let's do that.
We'll talk about it later, but she found maybe a footprint.
Very cool. Well, we'll talk about that later. I want to go through some of these creepy and weird things, and then I want to go towards Bigfoot and the Grassman as well. So with Melonhead, you mentioned these strange things, Helltown and the Gore Orphanage. Are they all connected? Are there some things? Tell us the stories of Helltown and the Gore Orphanage, Amy.
Well, the Gore Orphanage reminds me somewhat of Melonhead. That is a story out near Vermilion, Ohio, I believe is where that started. And there's actually a road called Gore Orphanage Road, but it's not gore like gory, bloody, yucky. A gore is, and I should know this, but it's some type of a like surveying instrument or something like that. So it actually is a noun, not an adjective in this name. And so, and there was an orphanage. See, I know, I can't remember quite what it is, but I think it's some kind of a stick or a tool used for surveying. And so that's where the gore comes from, not like something gory and yucky. But and the orphanage, there was an orphanage not too far away from this road. I mean, it wasn't right there, but when you put those two words together, gore and orphanage, a lot of stories popped up around that road. So supposedly there was this orphanage, and that it burnt down. And if you go out there, there's supposed to be little handprints that come on your car, on the windshield and the windows of your car from the ghostly children that are running around there. But the Gore Orphanage, I mean, that's a big one. I lived in Cleveland for several years, and a lot of people would talk about going out there at night on Gore Orphanage Road and seeing if you could find these little child ghosts. But I feel, it's just the name lent itself to a story.
What about Helltown? Is that of a similar vein, or is that something more tangible?
Helltown is interesting. Again, I think that it has its roots in reality that's not very scary, but turned into something more, and people go down there still. The buildings are no longer there as far as I know. But what happened was the area that Helltown was located is down near the Cuyahoga Valley National Park. And before the park came into existence, or at least part of it came into existence, the government, by eminent domain, from what I understand, bought up a bunch of houses and buildings in this small town because they wanted the national park to go through that area. So from what I understand, they bought these houses against the will of the people that lived there. They were not happy about losing their homes, but what are you going to do? So the plans for that part of the park didn't come through right away. And so these buildings stood there for years and years and years, started to become dilapidated. They put up barriers and stuff to go in there because it became dangerous. And I know there was a church. The church might still be standing, but there was a church, and it was kind of built in the Gothic Revival style where the crosses were upside down, but people thought that was creepy, and they were saying there was a bunch of satanic rituals going on there. Who knows if people did anything like that? But what I know is that the legend of that area was based in the government taking over the town. It wasn't like something evil ran all the people out or anything like that. But people still will go there, down to that area, try to get in, even though a lot of roads are blocked. And there are legends that there's hauntings down there. I remember hearing about an old school bus that people said, all these children had died in, but really it was just some hippie guy or something with his family living in the school bus. And so it wasn't like anything bad, but an old abandoned school bus seemed creepy, I guess. So people start putting their stories around it. But I still have people that swear things happen down in Helltown. I have never had anything happen, and I've been down there close to there camping and stuff, but I think it's just another urban legend. But one creature that kind of goes along with that same area is called the Peninsula Python. And I think it's kind of a mashup between the Helltown stories and something else, because the Peninsula, that's hard to say, the Peninsula Python, the legend there supposedly in the 1940s, there was a python that escaped from a circus that had gone through town. And from time to time, different farmers and people would say that they saw it, or they would see the trail of it. And so perhaps maybe a snake really did escape from a circus. But now...
probably did.
Yeah, probably did. But now the stories kind of have merged into the whole Helltown thing, because from what I understand, when the government did buy up the properties, there was a dump in that area, and it did have some toxic chemicals and stuff, because some of the workers that went into it supposedly got rashes, and, it wasn't a very healthy environment. So people started saying that the toxic sewage or chemicals made this giant snake. So those two stories merged into one thing, and then you have the Peninsula Python.
So is it fair to say, before we come on to the Minerva monster, Grassman, Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it for Ohio, that most of the stories seem to be somebody saw something, possibly a real animal, possibly a case of misidentification, and these things get confabulated into tales to scare teenagers and children, and that's how legends and myths happen in Ohio. Is that fair with most of them, or am I being too acerbic?
Oh no, I think you're right. That's how I take it. I mean, there you have these stories, and definitely if you look into the history of them, like you said, there's something there, but I think they turn into something bigger.
Okay, good. Now, Ohio is very well known as one of the big spots for Bigfoot research, and I know you're very involved in that. So why is Ohio, do you think, a good place for Bigfoot?
Well, when I first started researching this, I did not think that Ohio is a good place for Bigfoot research. And there are still times when I think about it and I'm like, this is crazy. Like, could this really be true? And, when I first started thinking about it, if I ever did think about Bigfoot, it was always out in the Pacific Northwest, with those huge forests and that go on and on and on. And so when you think about Ohio, it still sounds strange to me. However, now I know somewhat better, and I know we do have a lot of forested areas. We have a lot of farmland, which means food. We butt up against western Pennsylvania, and there's a lot of forest in there, and a lot of times sightings that I personally find out about or have people reach out to me about are in the area where Ohio and Pennsylvania meet, in that forested area there. There's a lot southern Ohio too, but I think that it really could be. And there's a lot of forested area. Like I said, there's a lot of water. You need water for any types of animals, but a lot of time Bigfoot is seen along waterways. You have a population of people, hunters specifically, and fishermen who are out in the woods and who are seeing things. And I've been fortunate because lately I've been able to talk to a lot of hunters and outdoorsmen and women at some different outdoor shows and things like that I've been at. And those are the people that I like to talk to because they're not really your maybe typical, although I don't know really what a typical Bigfooting person is, but they are people that are just out doing their thing and they're saying they're seeing these things.
A typical Bigfoot person is a glamorous and handsome and beautiful, highly intelligent and rational person. Is that right, Amy?
That's right, and they usually have a Bigfoot accent, a British accent. A British Bigfoot accent.
A British Bigfoot. Oh yeah. Oh gosh. Well, I would never call myself a Bigfoot researcher. But I do have an interest in the subject, of course.
Yes,
I just
you do. Yes.
All over the place. Now, yep. When we're thinking about, so let's hear your story in relation to Tina. Were you with her? What happened?
It was really interesting. So Tina she's an awesomely fun person, but she's very down to earth. She is in no way like somebody who goes out there and sees Bigfoot everywhere, right? So she's very practical too. Fun and practical, which is a good combination. So we were having our event down in Columbiana County and not thinking, we had gone out at night a few times with some people, looking around, hiking around, seeing if there was anything going on, anything to see, but not really expecting anything to happen. If you have a bunch of people together, we were more concerned with, is there enough toilet paper in the bathroom? Does everybody have pancakes to eat?
So when you say your event,
like that kind of thing.
Would you want to tell people what your event was? What was your event, Amy? Just so we
sure. Well, it is called Creekfoot, and this spring we had our second Creekfoot. We're planning on doing one in the spring of each year and in the fall of each year for as long as people are interested in coming. Very casual. We modeled it off of Todd and Diane Neese's Beachfoot that's out in Oregon, and just a kind of a gathering of area researchers, kind of like a Bigfoot family reunion. And so we had our second one, like I said, just a few weeks ago at the end of April, and it's really fun. People come, they bring their kids, a couple people bring their dogs. We raise money for the camp. It's a summer camp for kids for about 5 to 6 weeks during the summer down in Columbiana County. And we raise money just through auctions, a pancake breakfast. It's very inexpensive to go. It's $5 per person per night to throw up a tent there. And we just have a lot of fun. Campfires and hiking and potlucks and all that kind of thing. So it's a good time. So if people are interested, we have a limit of how many we can fit there, but I am always loving to hear people that might like to join us. And the next one is going to be the last weekend in September this year. So you can find me on Facebook. Mm-hmm.
So you can find all the information about that off Amy on Facebook. Okay, so let's hear the story now. So Tina, what happened?
Okay, so it was the last morning that we were there, and a friend of ours, I'm not sure if he wants me to say his name, so I won't because I'm always careful about that, but a friend of ours said that he had heard something outside of his tent the night before, and actually to the point, not just heard something, but felt something kind of like pushing onto the tent. And so he thought that he saw some kind of an indentation in the grass outside of his tent. So he came and got me to go take a look at it. And it was hard to tell. It did look like something had stepped there, but with so many people around, you don't know, what could be there. I was going to say I'm a pretty skeptical person, and so is he. So we were kind of looking at it and not sure what we were seeing or anything like that. And about, I'd say, I'm not sure, maybe 5 minutes later or so, Tina had gone out there and was talking to him and some other people too. And so she decided to look around, and she saw over going up a hill, there was a muddy area with like a little, I wouldn't even call it a stream, just a little trickle of water going through there because it had rained. And there were some footprints right there. And she called me out to look at it, and it was hard to kind of figure out because we figured out that one of the footprints was going up the hill and one was coming down the hill. So whatever or whoever it was had gone up and come down, or come down and gone up. And so she's looking at this, and it was very deep, especially the one on the left. It was very deep, and it looked big, and it looked like you could see some toes, and so we were looking at it, and we're kind of like, I'm not sure. And she went up onto the hillside, and she found not a trackway with other footprints in the mud, but in the like leaves, you could see where something had stepped. And so again, at this point, we're not sure if it could just be a person. People were there, so you always have to be like super, super skeptical. But luckily, David Wickham, who's another friend and research partner of mine, he had brought some hydrocal that he gave like a little presentation of how to do footprints the night before. So he had it with him, and he came out and did a casting of the left footprint. And it was really, he just had enough to do the left one. But it was really big. Like when he started doing it and I saw his foot next to it, I'm like, that really is, there is a big foot. So anyway, we're still at the point. He cast that for Tina. She has it at home, and she's been painstakingly getting rid of the dirt and leaves and everything off of it to see what there is to see. But it was kind of exciting. There was a possible print right there. So we'll let you know. And it's not too far away, I know, where some others have been found.
No, that's interesting. I mean, is there anything more you can tell us about it? Its size and whether there was any definition, or is that as much as you can tell us right now?
Well, right now, I don't know that much because she's still cleaning it up. And as a good Bigfoot researcher, I should be able to tell you the size, but I am not sure. I would have asked for that. But it's big. You know what? If you're not sure, you're not sure.
If you're not sure, you're not sure. I much prefer.
I don't want to make something
from an evidential. I much prefer from an evidential point of view somebody saying I'm not sure or I don't know, rather than taking a wild guesstimate, which comes back to haunt them. No, that's perfectly fine.
But we will let you know. I'll let you know what is found out about it.
Okay, very cool. Now, when you think about the Bigfoot in Ohio, whatever you want to call it, is there any recent sightings of it which you have considered to be more plausible than others, and if so, why?
There have been, every time I talk to somebody, because it's really my favorite. I love being out in the woods myself. I love investigating, if that's what you want to call it. Basically I hike. I look for things. I listen. And I love doing that, but I think I told you this once before that I'm kind of not a very lucky big-footing person, I guess, because a lot of things don't happen to me. But that also,
you might just be more
I'm
realistic.
not going to lie about it.
No, you might just be more, Amy, you might just be more realistic in the sense that, there are some people who seem to go out in the woods and have multiple encounters every time they walk around. That seems to me to be highly, highly unlikely.
I agree. I mean, you never know, but it makes me question for sure. Yeah. So I mean, I love being out there, but my real favorite thing is just the human interest part of the whole thing, and listening to people with their stories, what they say they've seen. And some people, you're asking if I find any like a little more credible or not. There are some that really stick out to me that way. One was, and I don't remember if we talked about this before, I don't think so, but one was from a wildlife exterminator who lives actually very close to my mother. And he had a sighting that was in kind of on the border of Mahoning and Columbiana County. And he is an incredibly believable person. He's not a Bigfooter. This isn't something he's all into or anything like that. But he submitted his report because he says he saw something and he wanted to make it known. So he was out culling coyotes off of a property on a road, again, not really far from my mom's, and which is not really far from whatever I had seen back in 2012. Again, mine was from far away, so I'm kind of like, I'm not sure what it was, but it was, by the way a crow flies, it wasn't too far from there. Anyway, he was out hunting these coyotes that had become a nuisance, and I'm trying to make a long story shorter, but when he was getting his rifle and different things out of the trunk of his car, he said he looked over to his left and he saw in a field kind of, I think maybe 100 yards away. I could be a little bit wrong on that distance, but not too far. But he saw some turkeys out there in this clearing. There was a wooded area and then a clearing, and he said he saw something white, kind of off to the right, more closer to the trees where these turkeys were. And he was like, I wonder what that is, but he didn't really bother himself about it. But later when he went into the woods and he's looking for coyotes, he said out stepped this animal, this creature. He said it was white, about 4 foot tall, and he didn't know what it was. And he said, like I said, he was a wildlife exterminator. He's very familiar with the wildlife in this area. He used to work and manage a wildlife area down in Florida as well. So he knows birds, he knows all kinds of animals. So he said he started going through his head, and I talked to him again recently, and one of the things he was thinking was could it be something that an exotic animal that escaped from somewhere, because he couldn't figure it out. Yeah. He was thinking, could it be a porcupine, a really big porcupine? Because their quills can be rather white. Could it be a big snowy owl, really big one? He said those things all went through his head, and then he's like, no, it's none of those things. So again, he thought, could it be an exotic animal? But he's trying to figure out what it is. He had been close up to chimpanzees in his line of work before and things like that, and he thought it looked like some type of a primate. He said he never thought right at first anything about Bigfoot, first of all, because that's not something that was on his radar, and also it wasn't big. It wasn't, if you think of Bigfoot, you think of something really tall and dark, and this thing was small and white. But he actually did a conference call with my zoo book project that I'm involved in, and he was telling all of us his story, and it was really intriguing because he was talking about how at one point it was swaying back and forth, about how long its arms were. It would come out into his path, and then it would retreat, and then it would come out again, and then it would retreat, and then it would come out again. It was very curious. It was, he said, finally at some point, and he saw this thing for a long time. He thought about raising up his rifle to kind of see if it could be a person, in a costume or something like that, but they didn't think that would be a good idea, so he didn't. But when he started to kind of do that, it didn't have a reaction. It wasn't like, hey, it's just me, I'm kidding, like a neighbor kid or something. But he said it looked like a natural creature. And then it was later that he realized it could have been a juvenile Sasquatch, juvenile Bigfoot. And he was just very, very credible, not trying to get his name out there or anything, not trying to prove anything. He said he just saw something that he couldn't explain, and I think the closest that it got was about 50 feet.
And that was very recently?
That one was he told the story more recently, but it happened a few years ago.
Okay. Is there any stories that you've heard in the last 12 months or that really strike you as being credible, or is it the most recent ones in the last few years?
No, there are some that I've gotten recently. I do a lot of investigating in Pennsylvania as well, so some of my really cool ones are from Pennsylvania, but I know we're talking about Ohio today. So there is one that I heard of at one of my outdoor shows that I went to and was gathering reports and talking to people and seeing if there was anything that people were seeing. And what's really interesting is that I wasn't sure how that I was going to be received. My friend Dave Groves invited me to go with him to one in Pennsylvania for that one. And we had, or I was there the first night, and I had vendors coming up to me and telling me their stories, and these hunters after hunter would talk to us. So we also, Tina Sams and I did one in Girard, an outdoor show with hunters and fishermen and, people, again, that are out in the woods. And we had a guy who came up to us with his two friends. The two friends walked past the table, and he came back and told us his story. So they're, people don't want to be made fun of, but they are very earnestly telling that they've seen these creatures. But one of the people that I talked to...
Amy, just pause for a second. Just pause for a second. I just want to understand. So you're at these conferences. It doesn't matter if it's Pennsylvania. We don't have to. We're not going to be anal about that. But you're at these conferences, and you say that a number of different hunters and people are coming up to you and telling you multiple recent stories about seeing Bigfoots in the vicinity of Ohio or Pennsylvania. Is that right? Is that a synopsis of what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting. That's significant. And did you find any of these stories conflated, or did you find them credible?
I would say that about 70% of them I found very credible, or at least reasonable. There were a few that I had a hard time believing. I always say that I don't want to ever call anybody a liar. I don't know exactly what Bigfoot is, and so, far be it from me to say what they're saying couldn't be true, but just from different things they would say, I found it harder to believe. But of any group of people I've ever talked to that I found very credible and believable, it would be the hunters that are out in the woods. And so I've started doing these as often as I can. I was invited to go set up a booth and talk to people at Ohio Division of Wildlife Expo that they had out in Huron, Ohio. And that was my favorite, because I was set up right across from like the people that were talking about bumblebees and honeybees and dragonflies and foxes and, all these different real animals. And they invited me to go there and have a table to talk about Bigfoot. And I wasn't there to talk about it as folklore, really, or anything like that. People were really interested in science behind it and what's going on in the world of Bigfooting. And I had a lot of people stop by my booth and tell me stories there also.
So if you will, tell us one of the stories, or a couple of the stories that really stick in your mind.
Okay. There was one that was from one of the expos, the hunting, fishing thing. And this young man he had a police background, a law enforcement background. And he said that he saw a Bigfoot from like, I'm thinking like 30 yards maybe, but then he was able to see it through his gun scope, 6 times magnified. So what he said was that he thought it was the largest black bear that he'd ever seen. And when he looked through the scope, he said, "This is not a bear." And the details that he had, just from the how long or how short the hair on its face was compared to the hair on its head, how broad the shoulders were, how the eyeballs were like all brown or black and no white showing, how when it saw him and realized like he was looking at it, its jaw dropped, if you want to say it that way. He's the only person I've ever talked to in my whole time investigating Bigfoot sightings that said that he saw its genitals, which I found like he was like a little bit, maybe not embarrassed, but maybe a little bit to tell me that at first. Because the first time I actually talked to him over the phone first, and then he came to one of those expos in person and talked to me. And he just had so many details, and I thought, that's why don't people see that more often? I remember, I forget who it was. It might have been Lauren Coleman that did a talk about that one time at a conference I went to. Like, why aren't people seeing that? Because if it's an animal, you'd think it would have it. So he was very detailed.
Well, let me ask you a question about that. And I think your point raises a very valid one. How did he describe the genitals?
He said it looked like an uncircumcised male, and that, like in proportion to the rest of it, it was pretty normal looking, is how he said it. But I mean, he was awfully nice, and you could tell he was like a little bit embarrassed to tell me. But I'm like, no, please tell me, because we would like to gather all this type of information. Yeah.
Yeah, and people that may be wanting to talk BS may assume, it was a very, very large penis or something like that,
Yeah.
But in fact, gorillas don't have particularly large penises. Go on about this too much,
right.
Sure. But that's the reality of the situation. Obviously, I've seen great apes in the wild, so I do know what I'm talking about. I've not just seen them like on TV. I've seen them. And if you see an animal, you look at the whole of the animal. Yeah, you don't just look at it. I'm always suspicious if someone gives me an account and they say, well, and they start talking about it having glowing red eyes, and they don't describe the rest of the creature. Oh, it's big with glowing red eyes. I'm like, oh yeah. That was a cardboard cutout that you were like building on.
Exactly. Now, he had so many details. Like, I have pages and pages and pages of like writing down what he was telling me, that I almost was like, can this be real? Because he had so many. But then when he said he had that law enforcement background, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. That's what they're trained to do. And he said he got a good look at it for quite a long time until it backed away into the forest. So he went up to see if he could find any prints or anything. Couldn't find anything like that. Didn't notice an odor, but he was like right on top of all of those things that I would have wanted to ask him anyway. And just a really smart guy. I found him incredibly believable.
Very cool. Is there any other accounts you can share with us? I think we've probably got time to talk about another one that you think might stick in your mind.
Sure. There's some different ones. I'm trying to think. I can't remember exactly how long ago this one happened, but it's recent. I'm just not sure if it's within that year you were talking about. Sure. But there were two guys that were actually from out of town, and they were riding their bikes along what's called the Greenway Trail down in Lisbon, Ohio. And they said that they had their helmets on, and the one noticed like something hit its helmet. And they kind of stopped, looked around, and kept going. And when they turned their bike around and came back right along that same area, something hit their helmet, realized it was a rock that bounced off. They both say that they saw a Sasquatch that was kind of squatted down in a little stream that runs across and under the bike path. And that there were rocks down where it was, and it had thrown, they were assuming that's what had thrown the rock at the helmet. And so they were frightened. They biked on away, but they both gave a good and similar description of it. And I love when there is more than one person that you can interview, because, you can view them separately, make sure everything adds up, and And they really did. And I think they were both from Virginia. So they weren't even, they don't even live here, but it was impressive enough to them for them to submit a report and talk about, what had happened to them.
Very interesting. And the account with the guy where he actually he gave you a good physical description of its anatomy, is that in Ohio? Is that where would it be, near Salt Fork Lake Park or a different place?
That one is, like I said, I do a lot of my investigation right on the border between Ohio and PA. So I guess that one actually was over into PA. I talked to him in Ohio.
Yeah, okay. So in Ohio, so you're doing research across a very broad area, is that fair to say? Well,
not really. Kind of. Most of my reports come from Columbiana County, and so this campground where Creekfoot is actually a hot spot for sightings down in that area. Right across the river, the Creekfoot camp is right in Ohio. Across the river is the state forest, and it just not very far from there, it hits Pennsylvania. So it's all like you can walk to Pennsylvania. Even from my house, if I wanted to, I could walk to Pennsylvania. It's not very far. We're right on the border. So the creature could walk right over, so it would depend on where the person saw it. Was it in Ohio? Was it in Pennsylvania? So, but they're right bordering each other. I also do go up to the Allegheny National Forest in Pennsylvania quite often too. That's a few hours drive. But what I'm talking about is down, again, Columbiana County, and Pennsylvania is right there, across the river.
Good stuff. And obviously, you do a lot of camping now, and you're quite well known for your camping tips. Is there any you particularly like to share with people, or any sort of camping debacle stories that you've learned from and got better at?
Oh my goodness, I love camping, and when I started camping again, we had a cabin growing up, and I was in the woods a lot, but we never really tent camped. So I had a big learning curve when I decided, I'm going to start camping by myself and traveling around wherever I can and go camping. And I just decided I was going to do it. I figured that I could learn along the way, and I have. My brother, before he passed away, before I started doing this, or right around the time I started doing this, he taught me how to make a good campfire. So one of the last things he ever taught me. And he actually was going to be doing this with me, so we never got to really do it together. But I always think about him when I'm out traveling around and camping. But, yeah, I have my little tent. I don't have a big fancy tent. I have a very small 2-person, if you're lucky, tent. It's much more comfortable when I'm in there by myself. But it's tiny.
Just a quick question, because Lester obviously, does he join you in the tent? Because I know he obviously strengthens your immune system in his own special way. Yes, he does, and he does join me in the tent. How is that? Is that like a hot air balloon by the morning, or?
It kind of is. I'll never forget. You remember when I first met you in person, right? What you said to me, the first words you've ever said to me.
I asked you about Lester's farting. That was the first question I ever asked.
Yes. Oh, how's Lester's farting? How's it doing? Yes. It's still just as bad as ever. But yeah, and that's funny because the last time we were camping in that tent, we were in Cook Forest, Pennsylvania. Might have been the last time we went together, maybe somewhere else. But anyway, we were there last summer, and I really, really I truly know you're not supposed to feed any wildlife. I know this. I can't help myself sometimes. So at Cook Forest, at their campground, there are all these raccoons. And I was thinking, I love raccoons. I think they're adorable, but I didn't on purpose feed them or leave food out or anything. But we have this little camping chair, and it's like a double chair. So I was sitting on the one side, and the raccoon came and sat next to me on the other seat. And so I was eating some toast, so I had to give it a little bit of my toast. But then that's all. But so I gave it a little bit of my toast, and I'm like, no, you're not supposed to do this. But anyway, we were sleeping in that tent, and if you don't know about my tent, it looks like a club sandwich. So like you could have all these other tents, but mine looks like a club sandwich, and I love it. Anyway, we were sleeping in there that night, and all night it was like scratch, 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 scratch on the outside of the sandwich because the raccoon, and I'm assuming it's the same one, wanted food. But so Lester wasn't really happy about that. But, well, it was still fun.
So he told you off.
Yeah.
Oh no. So, but you've got more used to camping now, haven't you? You're more comfortable with it than you ever were.
I love it. Yeah, I really am. I the reason I like that tent, and it was actually, I know when they originally came out, they were pretty pricey. But the price went down, and I had made some kind of a Facebook post before I even met Lester, I think, that whoever buys me this tent, I'll marry that man someday, like that kind of thing. And so after we had dated for a while, my daughter told him that, hey, that tent that my mom wants is on clearance. So he bought it for me for Christmas. But, yeah, it's a really good tent. And I like it because it has like a metal frame on poles that you put the under tent up and hook it on, and then the sandwich looking part goes on the outside, and it's very watertight, so I can kind of camp anywhere. But yeah, I really enjoy it. I like to backpack into places, and sometimes I've been out with some people and I just use a tarp. I don't even use a tent if we're going to be up all night exploring and stuff. So I know I'm impressing myself lately.
Yeah, look at you. Whoa. Now, you mentioned your daughter Anna. Now, I remember seeing some photographs where she was so deliriously happy when she was out bigfooting in the woods. Is Anna likely to ever join you again with her Dora Explorer gear, or is that it for Anna?
I'm not sure. She used to go with me all the time, like when this first started. And then she grew up and doesn't like it anymore. But I have hope. She's 22. She just turned 22 in March. And I have a little bit of hope that she'll do it with me again, because she was saying some of her friends, found out that I like to go out camping and looking for Bigfoot, and they're kind of interested in doing it. So if they'll do it, then maybe she'll do it.
I'll put money on it that she does do it. Yeah.
Okay.
Sooner. Yeah. I'll put money on it. Yeah. There you go. So the deal is, if she doesn't do it within the next few years, I'll owe you breakfast. How about that?
Oh, okay.
After a camping trip or something.
Does. Yes,
yeah.
Okay.
We'll see, but I bet she does. People have a way of coming back to things, especially if they're in their childhood.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool. It's not cool when you're 18, 19, but as you get into your 20s, it's a cool and interesting hobby that you
It really is, and
eventually,
that's
not when you're 18,
I used to do it. Yeah.
So what's next for you, Amy? What's next? What are you going to do next?
Oh boy. Well, I have a lot of library talks, things like that coming up this spring and summer. I have Creekfoot again at the end of September. I'm helping with Creature Weekend down at Salt Fork State Park. That's going to be, I helped with it last year. I actually spoke there last year with Project Zoo Book. And I'm going to help with it again this year. It's the weekend of October 18th through 20th, and it's fabulous. It's my favorite like Bigfoot conference. I love it. Bob Gimlin will be there again this year, and we're just starting. We're going to be hearing the other speakers coming up soon. Tickets are on sale, so I hope a lot of people will come because it's a lot of fun. I am hosting some different things. Another cool thing is that some different state parks are having me come out, and I met a lot of people through that Ohio Division of Wildlife Expo I went to in particular. And so I'm going to be doing a Bigfoot day out in Toledo at a state park out there. I'm going to be hosting a whole Bigfoot weekend in Mill Creek State Park, which is in my own beautiful hometown of Youngstown, Ohio. I'm going to be, that's in the fall. I'm helping to head up a weekend at Beaver Creek State Park in the fall as well, so I'm getting ready for all those things. I'm going to be going up to Kinzoo with the Pennsylvania Bigfoot Project this summer. Kinzoo Dam, if you've never been there, it's beautiful. There's an old bridge that got taken down by a tornado, and it's just, you can go out on this like skywalk by the dam, and it's just trees, forest everywhere. That's the upper part of the Allegheny National Forest, one of my favorite places to go.
Very cool.
Doing a lot of cool things with
you're doing so much. You know that's great. I'm glad you're so busy. Let me say this to you, Amy, and you'll think about this another time. You're going to see me sooner than you think, but that's all I'm going to say right now. But you've been a wonderful, there you go. You've been a wonderful guest, Amy. Wonderful guest. It's always our pleasure to have you on the show. We really appreciate everything that you've done. I'm glad you're doing so many different things, and you're so busy, and it just seems to get your research and the things you're involved in just seem to get more and more and more. I mean that's great news. You're a very positive role model for the Bigfoot community, if that's the right word. But you're and I like the fact that you're so good with a great female researcher as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much. I had a lot of fun.
Great stuff. All right, Amy, take care, and no doubt I'll speak to you very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Amy Bue. Always a marvelous guest. Always a treat to have her on the show. We'll be back next Tuesday, Mike and I. Until then, we'll speak to you then. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful week, ladies and gentlemen. Take care and good night.